Let's sort of, whilst we are talking banking, actually, we'll just stick in that space. Somewhat of a sidestep, I guess. Judo Capital is set to mount a challenge to the major banks after being awarded a full banking licence from APRA. Now, Judo Bank will focus on loans to small and medium-sized businesses, a sector which we know has been hit with tighter lending standards following the Hayne Royal Commission. The bank plans to double in size to 200 staff in the coming year, and it has pledged to bring the human face back to banking. For more, I'm very pleased to welcome Joseph Healy, co-founder of Judo Bank, who joins us now live. Look, Joseph, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your time on the program today.
My pleasure.
And look, you know, congratulations on being granted your full banking licence. I imagine it is quite a milestone and an important day for you. What exactly does it mean for Judo Capital or Judo Bank?
Well, as a bank, it gives a great deal of optionality around how we fund our business and how we create the capacity to lend to small business. Also, I think there's a real value in being regulated. I know there's different views on the costs and pros of regulation, but we believe that the banking license is a privilege that's bestowed by APRA on behalf of the community on institutions, and it allows those institutions then to perform functions that helps grow both the household sector and the business sector. So our capacity to grow is significantly enhanced by the banking license and our ability to look at a whole range of ways in which we can fund the growth of Judo.
We made mention in the introduction there that one of your goals or one of your aims is to bring the human face back to banking. I'll sort of want to ask the point of what you actually mean by that. You'll obviously be aggressively sort of challenging the four major banks here. What is your point of difference and what do you mean by that comment?
Okay, well, it's a great question. And I think what we've seen progressively over the last decade, if not longer, and this is true, I have to say, of the banking market, certainly in the developed world, that there has been a progressive industrialization, a standardization, a systemization, if you will, and a dehumanization of the service proposition offered to customers. Now, in many segments of the economy, that works quite well. I think in the consumer sector, where day-to-day transactions and commodity products like credit cards and mortgages, that standardization and industrialization and dehumanization is not a significant factor. But in the heartland of the economy, in the small to mid-sized business sector, there is a need for that human involvement. There's a need for a banker, a skilled banker, to be able to sit down and understand the needs of the business and help tailor solutions both to the financing needs and to the risk management challenges that the business face. These capabilities don't lend themselves to automation or digitalization as other segments might do. So we feel that as the industry, the banking industry, has industrialized its operating model and dehumanized the service proposition to its customers, that the SME community has largely been left behind. And for that reason, we saw an opportunity to build a bank that went into the gap that the major banks in particular have allowed to open up and provide a service that's based on traditional values of professionalism, of understanding businesses, of applying judgment, not solely algorithm-driven decision-making, but applying judgment, because in the small to mid-sized business sector, that can often make a huge difference between getting access to credit and not getting access to credit.
Mr. Healy, Mike Todd here from the NAB. As I tiptoe the nuanced questions that I'm trying to think of how to ask, one of the things is that you're really well credentialed in banking and you're an ex-NAB, a leader in the NAB as an organisation. And everyone speaks very fondly of you and the great work that you did in the business bank and talking about that human face. So how is it, I've got two parts to the question. One is that I understand what you mean. Are you saying that banks are becoming in that sector, because NAB is the business bank, are you saying it's too digital and that therefore the bankers aren't going to be able to become humans to it? And if that's the case, how will you do that? How will you implement? What's the, if you like, the execution risk to the business that you're talking about? So why can't the bank do it? And then how can you do it?
Well, I think that's a great question, Mark. I mean, the banks obviously, and I think from a bank perspective, it's quite a rational thing to do to try to automate and standardise and centralise as much as possible. And a lot of small business customers today are being sent to call centres rather than having dedicated bankers who understand their business. And again, if you're sitting inside a large bank, that's a rational decision to make because it lowers costs and it frees up capacity. But the difficulty is that for many small businesses, they heavily rely on the involvement of a banker who really understands the business and who's been with the business over a period of time. That local knowledge can be quite fundamental to the success of a small business. Now, the industry, as I say, has made a decision, and this is not just an issue in the context of the Australian banking system, you see this in the UK and elsewhere, that they want to really standardise as much as they can and give the customers a very much a tailored, not so much a tailored offer, but a take it or leave it, cookie cutter approach to banking, and that really has meant that many small businesses have felt neglected and left behind. Now, Judo, in seeking to move into the gap that has been opened up by the banks, will only bank small to mid-sized business. So we will specialise. We'll specialise, and we've also built the business up over the course of the last 3 years from a blank piece of paper to make sure that the technology and the processes and the systems and the bureaucracy, if you will, that is evident in all big organisations, and particularly in big banks, is kept to a minimum so that it's easy for bankers to do business with customers and for customers to do business with the bank. Now, that's a fundamental difference between Judo and the major banks, because we don't have legacy problems in terms of technology and systems and bureaucracy and complexity. When our bankers come in the morning, they have one password and one system that has all the information that they need, and that system is an end-to-end from a customer relationship system right through to our core banking platform and accounting system. And it means that we can spend more and more time with customers and less time dealing with the complexity of the internal organisation. That fundamentally means that where Judo spends its money, it's going to be close to, or its operating expenses are going to be very close to where the customer is, not so much in the complexity of a large organisation. So I think fundamentally, or passionately believe fundamentally, that this will make a big point of difference. The other thing, Mark, just to kind of build out an important point, is that we have been recruiting bankers, and part of our recruitment process involves them doing a 3-hour exam that tests their credit skills and judgment, because we want to make sure that our bankers are experienced in evaluating not just the quantitative information that surrounds any business, but the qualitative information, and are able to apply judgment in a way that, unfortunately, that the banking industry has allowed the craft of SME banking to fall into decline because of the preference that has been given to standardization, industrialization, and, as I described, dehumanization. So the Judo proposition is a mixture of old and new. It's traditional face-to-face banking, but built on modern technology so that the operating system is both easy for the customer and easy for the banker.
I suppose, when we think about most of the organisations that are new to banking, new banks, most people think of them as a digital proposition. And you're not describing that. You're describing a proposition where you're finding bankers that are more engaged with the clients. How do you get the word out to these prospective SMEs, part one? And part two, when I think about the lending tree type strategy, where it becomes then the customers they win tend to be the customers people want to lose, because if you and I would both know, rarely do you ever hear a banker saying I should charge a higher rate for my customer. They always want to charge the lowest rate. That's just the way they are. So the ones that you might miss are the ones that the bank would say, well, gee, that was one I was okay missing. How do you get to those bigger clients, and in that respect, how do you get to those customers, those bigger SMEs in the mid-cap, if you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Well, first of all, going back to the beginning of the question, I mean, we've been active in the market in terms of lending to SMEs for the last year. Been spent the last 3.5 years building the company, but it was always our intention to operate under the radar, so to speak, until such time as we had hired the staff that we needed in our offices in Melbourne, Sydney, and in Brisbane, And then with the banking license, which was always part of our planning, that we would then lift the profile of the bank through a whole range of different marketing channels, including social media, including TV, printed media, all the kind of conventional ways that a company would seek to promote its brand. So you'll see over the course of the next weeks and months a significant brand profile building from Judo as we make the business community, the small to mid-sized business community, aware that there is a viable and credible option to the current major banking system and within the major banking system. Now, so that's going to be an important part of getting our profile out there. We're also building strategic partnerships with a whole range of brokers in the market, pointing out where Judo is different from the main banks in terms of the way that we evaluate credit and the speed of decision making. We make a commitment that we will make a decision, yes or no, within 5 working days, and that decision is made by an individual who is accountable to the broker and to the customer for explaining the decision, say if we say no, or hopefully the decision we say yes. So I think that empowerment of the broker and the banker is a very important part of how we will differentiate ourselves in the market. When I speak to small to mid-sized businesses across the country, which I've been doing this for decades and maintained long-standing relationships, the regular gripe that comes from the small to mid-sized businesses is that either they don't know who their banker is, or they can't get a hold of their banker, or he or she has just been promoted into another job inside the organization, or they simply, there's a regular turnover of people and the knowledge of the business seems to be lost. And unfortunately, this is a problem that is endemic within the banking industry. It plays to my comment on industrialization that I made earlier on, that human involvement unfortunately is being lost. Judo seeks to build its proposition around the fact that a customer I should say, and a broker will speak to someone, and most of our bankers will be empowered or have delegated authorities to make credit decisions depending on their individual experience. But we are attracting people with very strong SME banking and risk management knowledge and experience, and that really is going to be the front end of our proposition. Quick decision making, sound judgment being applied, responsible banking always, but no moving away from another criticism that small businesses make of banks, and that is that the people who make decisions quite often, which is the internal credit team, centralized credit team, are faceless. That the customer can't talk to someone about why the bank may have misunderstood what they're trying to do or misunderstood the risks. There's a sense of being faceless, and that plays to my thesis about the dehumanization that has occurred in the industry. So Judo is going to fill it, go back to that void. It works in the SME banking. It's not something that we would seek to do in the consumer market, nor would we seek to do it in the large corporate market, because they are largely information efficient markets, whereas in the small to mid-sized business market, that is largely an information inefficient market, and it requires human judgment.
All right, excellent. Well. Look, Joseph, we unfortunately are out of time, so we will have to wrap it up there, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It sounds like you have some very exciting plans ahead of you, and we wish you all the very best. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much.